Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Mormon Stories podcast. I'm your host, John DeLynn. It's May 19th, 2025. And today we're answering the question, what is soft swinging? Do Mormons soft swing? And really what we're doing is we are launching our review on Mormon Stories podcast of a new episode of The Secret Lives of, or as I should say season, of The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. It's probably the number one show on Hulu right now. We covered season one back when it was airing, and we're ready for season two. So a couple things. We're going to try, well, spoiler alert in the sense that we're going to be talking about episodes 1 and maybe 2. And we're, there's a chance some of us have seen more. Some of us have seen the whole season 2. We're going to try not to give spoilers past episodes 1 and or 2, but we can't promise it, but we're going to try. But also go watch episodes 1 and 2 before you watch this episode if you want, but we're going to get into it. And what we do as kind of our specialty on Mormon Stories is we try to give the in-depth Mormon angle and in-depth Mormon analysis that other shows just simply can't do. So that's kind of our expertise, and that's what we're going to be doing today. We are live streaming, so we welcome our live stream audience. We encourage y'all to subscribe to this channel, to like this episode, and then please comment and ask questions freely. We've got Julia moderating the comments, and she's going to star your comments or questions. We really appreciate super chats if you want to support our program and if you want to make sure we see your questions or comments. The best way to do that is through a super chat donation. But as always, Mormon Stories exists through the generosity of just our normal monthly donors that donate through mormonstories.org. So thanks to you, our donors, who make this possible and make it so we don't have to do product placements or ads, specialized ads or any of that, reading on-air ads. We try to minimize all of that. Thanks again to our donors. So anyway, it's ready to begin. Good morning, everyone. And we're excited to have two familiar faces joining us back on the show. The first is Chelsea Homer. Hey, Chelsea.
Hi, I'm good to be here.
So I picked Chelsea because she's amazing and also because she leads Lost and Found Club. And it's a really important group for post-Mormon women. That's my way of describing it. She's super plugged into the secret lives of thousands of Mormon and ex-Mormon wives. But Chelsea, why don't you introduce yourself, because you'll probably do a better job than me.
Yeah, so I'm Chelsea Homer. I came on John's show a few years ago, shortly after leaving the church. It was a very emotional experience in this chair. I've been back a few times since, but I started a Facebook group called Faith Journey Meetups. You might be familiar. It's for women and gender expansive people who are deconstructing. It was meant to be a meetup hub, and then with COVID, it kind of turned into an online sounding board. And so a few years ago, a few friends and I started a club called Lost and Found Club. So it's a local Utah nonprofit. We work really, really hard to provide support, community, and resources for so many ex-Mormons, both here in Utah and abroad. We do monthly events. Just this week, we hosted a big watch party, for the Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, first 2 episodes of the new season. Alyssa was there in my backyard. It was so much fun. So we do several events a month. We have an online Discord hub for, probably 10, 15 events a month. We're doing a really, really big girls camp at the very end of the year, September and October. We still have tickets for that. If you want to come join us in the mountains at Camp Tracy. Anyway, we have a lot of fun. So yes, I just affiliate with a lot of ex-Mormons every single month.
How do people register for girls camp?
On our website, lostandfound.club. You can find us on Instagram, and you can see the links for all of those things. So.
And I've just heard only really positive things. So please consider attending if you fit the criteria and if you're interested.
Yes, we would love to have you. We have a good mix of regulars, people who come to all of our events, and newcomers. And so it's just a great way to make friends and share resources and get support.
And you're the one, Chelsea Homer, who has seen the entire season 2.
I did. I binged it in 24 hours because I'm a freak and I couldn't stop.
As you should.
So yeah, anyway, I'll try not to give too many spoilers today.
All right. Well, thanks for coming, Chelsea. And as you probably already have seen, Our second guest for today, back on the show, is the Alyssa Witbeck. Hey, Alyssa.
Hello.
Tell us a bit about yourself again. Remind us who you are and
My
what you do.
name is Alyssa. I also love reality TV, which is why I love talking about it. I'm a writer. A lot of things that I focus on are about the intersection of Mormonism, ex-Mormonism, and being a woman in the world right now. My website has updated publications on it. I have an essay coming out in Exponent later this summer that talks about basically the experience of being like a Mormon mom and an ex-Mormon mom. So that's my main contribution to this conversation. I'm also super pregnant, so I feel like all the women in this show have been pregnant right now. So I'm one of the girls in that way.
You're channeling the Mormon here for us.
Yeah. It's only my second. It's not like my third. So that would have really worked well with Whitney's commentaries, but that's okay. We'll just have the second baby instead and still relate.
I love it. Okay, well, welcome, Alyssa. So glad to have you, as always. We had advertised that Haley Rawl from Girls Camp Podcast was going to join us. Haley had a last-minute emergency, so we send our love to Haley and all of her people. And we hope to have a special guest, though, on this episode. She's just going to be arriving at a moment to be determined. So anyway, let's go ahead and jump in. So we've got season 2. All of the cast from season 1 has returned with a few new people. And I'll just say also as a disclaimer, before these episodes had even dropped, I knew we wanted to do this episode. So I reached out to y'all. We were all thumbs up. And I went and read the descriptions. And 3 of the 4 descriptions, if I'm remembering right, mentioned soft swinging. I've actually done a full episode on soft swinging or on swinging in Mormonism that I have not released. And I don't know if I'll ever release it. It was with Natasha Helfer. But it turned out that soft swinging wasn't even a major theme in the first episode or 2. It was kind of lightly touched on. So we are going to talk about it today. It's not clickbait, but I also don't want to lose track of the really crucial themes that even just episode 1 had. So really just to start with, any observations y'all want to make just about like season 2, the new cast of characters, how y'all were feeling about the old versus the new? Were you even excited about a season 2, or were you like me? It was just kind of like, I don't know if I'm up for another season at all because there's so much drama and it's so intense. So Chelsea, you go first.
Yeah, well, I was very excited because, like Alyssa, one of my favorite things to do is dissect religion and politics through the vehicle of pop culture. And so I saw a lot of us on the screen in season 1. And so season 2, I was very excited. They left on a big cliffhanger with Jen and Zac. So I think I was most excited in anticipating their storyline, which they jumped right into that. As far as the women, I follow a lot of them on social media. So you kind of get behind the scenes before the season even started. But I was very, very excited. Just the very opening scene of like, "Dear Heavenly Father," followed by expletives, and like them coming out of the water in their like baptismal, sexy looking dresses, and like the splicing of the temple every 10 seconds. Like, it's so campy. And for that reason, I just was obsessed because you just see so much of our backyards, like Fear Factory, some really common places here in Utah. And so it just kind of feels like home, and seeing that on a reality television show is just really, really fun and exciting for me.
Yeah. You all probably saw this in the notes that I shared. Like the B-roll for every single segue is like BYU, Mormon Temple, Angel Moroni. Like, I'm just thinking the church must be pooping bricks. You know what I mean? Like, to have this type of content constantly associated with, frankly, the church's most sacred or iconic symbols, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. All right, so what were your original thoughts about season 2?
Also thrilled. So ready. And then as soon as it started and we see the new intro with, again, like the sexy baptism, I was like, yes, I'm locked in now for this next season. I think what's super interesting about this show is, and I think just a lot of reality TV in general, or at least some, is that it is like pitched as this vapid, like guilty pleasure type watch. But especially here, there's some real intense life-changing type things that are being discussed and real traumas. And I think, and there's, I think we can discuss maybe the ethics of that or how that's portrayed, but I do think that's a really interesting element of this show that also feels very Mormon, is just that even though we're seeing, and people like to make fun of it, like, oh, it's like that salacious Utah show, the actual conversations that they're having are so real, and I think is, like Chelsea was saying, really representative of a lot of Mormon women's experiences.
1,000%. Like, again, it is vapid, it is obnoxious, it is ridiculous, it is even, we'll talk about this later, maybe even unethical in how exploitative and potentially disruptive it is to these people's individual lives and their families. And I'm just like, major theme check, major theme check, major theme check. Like, I probably had 10 major theme checks in episode 1. Do you agree, Chelsea?
Yeah. Episode 1 is like jam-packed. I think they really wanted you to stay longer, so they really filled a lot of storylines and just left a lot hanging from the first episode. So
let me ask you all this. One of the things that they start out talking about is sort of like this idea of smashing the Mormon patriarchy, but also that that season 1 potentially has been significantly helpful in sort of changing Mormonism and or Mormon culture, either to make Mormons seem less weird or to help loosen up our culture. Let me just start with that topic, and maybe Chelsea, I'll throw this to you first. Like, if you were to say, yeah, season 1 really was influential in giving Mormons a better name or a worse name, or like you're seeing Mormons, women show their shoulders more or drink whatever more, or hot tub while drinking alcohol more or whatever. Do you think season 1 has been influential in changing Mormon culture?
I don't know. I think it's too soon to really tell if it's changing anything on a larger organization standard, but I think in the micro orthodoxy levels, absolutely. I was listening to an interview from one of the executive producers who was saying he really hoped this series would be like a touchstone for the harder conversations of faith and family and religion. And having deconstructed, I can really see like it's really, really helpful to have a container like a movie, like a show. For me, it was John Oliver, to really explore and get permission to have new ideas, to want more. And so in that way, I can see the show being incredibly helpful if you were like in a marriage with like Zac and Jen, where there's a lot of like patriarchal forces at play, that it would be a lot easier to talk about their marriage before bringing it home into yours. And so in that way, I think it is really helpful. I think it's also just, at the bare minimum, just inspiring to see someone who can take a belief or a religion or a marriage that is harmful and say no, or set boundaries around that. As far as like smashing the patriarchy, I don't think anything like that is happening. I think a large criticism that I've seen of the show is that people talking about how these women are able to do things that many people with less privilege have been excommunicated for. And I think that's a conversation that's worth having if we're going to talk about anything remotely regarding like smashing patriarchy. And I kind of wish that they would be, a lot of the criticism has been very surface level. I think for it to smash patriarchy, it has to get systemic. So
yeah, it takes a little more than a reality TV show to smash millennia of institutionalized patriarchy. Alyssa, let's ask you really quickly, do you have any additional thoughts on so far this show's impact on Mormon culture?
Yeah, I mean, I think in a similar way, because a lot of these very common experiences are being discussed, I think women are able to hopefully, see themselves in some of these stories and be able to, like Chelsea was saying, maybe be able to articulate and criticize another relationship before they're able to talk about their own, or maybe be able to see like, oh, I can see these women who are like financially successful, things like that. However, I do think that's kind of like the main, every time they talk about smashing the patriarchy, that's the main angle that they're going at it with, is like, see, we're the breadwinners, we're able to financially provide for our children and our families, which I think is a big step. And I think that's something that is, a part of Mormonism, was women not participating in like the workforce. However, there's so much about patriarchy that is still existing in the show. And there's still a lot of like, even just the way the women will be arguing with each other. And like Chelsea was mentioning a little while ago, how a lot of the men's stories are still being really centered. I think there's patriarchy is still at the forefront. And I think a step is a step, and that's awesome. And I think it's great for these women to kind of start dissecting it. But in no way would I say patriarchy is being fully deconstructed by this show.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, guess what? Our special guest has arrived. And how fun it was. Like, I work like a couple doors down from Natasha Helfer, therapist Natasha Helfer.
You mean movie star Natasha Helfer?
What's that?
Movie star Natasha Helfer?
Yes, movie star. I do. I work a couple doors, and we communicate regularly over text. And lo and behold, Natasha Helfer shows up in episode 3. Natasha Helfer, welcome to Mormon Stories.
Thank you, John.
What's it like to be an international TV star?
Wow. I don't know if I would call it that exactly for a 5-minute cameo, but it's fun. It was really fun.
So for y'all who have seen episode 3, Natasha appears as a therapist to Michaela. Yeah. So we won't give spoilers there, but Natasha, I'm so glad you could join us today.
I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
I think I'm supposed to be looking that way, yes? Sometimes I want to look at you. Hi, John.
Conversationally. You can, I mean, we're trying to smash the patriarchy, so look where the fuck you want.
That's right. Okay. Oh, we've
Oh, sorry.
we have
broken the F barrier. I mean, with Secret Lives,
Well,
aren't they
John,
saying the F bomb like every 3 minutes?
Yeah,
they're
okay.
very
I just
controversial.
Language warning, we may swear.
last time it was just goddamn it. So I'm really proud of you.
Thank you. Thank you. She's proud of me. So Natasha, are you even watching Secret Lives of Mormon Wives other than where you appear on it?
No, I definitely watched it. I wasn't really sure when I was going to come in. So I watched season 1 going, okay, I think I'm going to be in here somewhere. And I wasn't, and that was fine. And then I realized they saved that clip for season 2. So yes, I've been watching all of it.
All right. Well, okay. Well, let's see. So there's so much we could talk about today. Thanks for coming, Natasha. I think the first thing that's worth talking about, and we kind of teased it, is soft swinging. And again, it's weird because it's really not a deep emphasis in the first couple episodes, at least, but it's also how they're really teasing all of this. So I think it's just worth sort of getting out in the open. Like, is Mormon swinging a thing? Is this just something that happened to these, 4 or 5 or 6 women and their husbands? Or is this something that actually is not just existing, but even like semi-prevalent, either in faithful Mormonism or in ex-Mormon or in both? And also, even though Natasha, I think you have the most experience, and I even told people that I did an episode with you that we haven't even released yet about swinging specifically. Chelsea, let's start with you. Like, is soft swinging and or swinging a Mormon or an ex-Mormon thing in your experience?
Yes.
Not in your personal experience.
Yeah, I guess just interfacing with a lot of post-Mormons every single month. These are conversations that a lot of people are having, like in that rubber band that you're deconstructing with Joseph Smith involves marriage and sexuality. And so in that deconstruction process, marriage is also on that altar to be dissected. And so these conversations that these women are having on these shows and things coming out sideways is something you definitely see that's very prevalent in post-Mormon spaces, for sure.
Very prevalent?
In the spaces I run in, yes. But I can't say, this is all anecdotal. I can't say like sweeping,
So and I'm not trying to be like shock jock or anything, but did I hear you say that in the friendships and the communities that you are aware of, non-monogamy is very prevalent?
I guess hinging on that word very, it is prevalent. It is something that we're all talking about quite a bit. I guess to understand the larger context, one of my friends, Courtney Kindred, called the Mormon Church a sex cult. And I don't think I truly understood what that meant, because I knew that the LDS founders were predatory in their sexual behaviors, but I didn't really understand until leaving and then starting this community building where I saw like how we have sexually severed ourselves as a people. And in doing so, like there's abstinence, there's purity culture, there's so much confessing and shame. And so we're harboring all of this, and then we're trying to be close in community. And I would say this intimacy and navigating consensual sex and stuff is probably the biggest barrier for me in my experience of just trying to have community care when sex is involved, because we have never seen that modeled because it's been so harmful. I know at one point, I think Taylor said something like, oh, if we would have just followed the church standards, then we would be avoiding this drama. But I disagree in that I think it's because a lot of people have been following these standards where it's just coming out sideways. And I think that's kind of what happens is there's not a lot of community care. We're all learning as we go. So that's why I'm saying it's kind of pervasive in that we're just all dissecting our own marriages in real time, and opening is an option.
So let's just pursue this a bit, and then I'll bring the other, Alyssa and Natasha on. So like, I almost wonder, there's a way to look at this where it's just like, oh, it's 2025 and people all over the United States in middle America are experimenting with non-monogamy. I don't know that, like, if you did a poll of like the average middle-class American, have you engaged in ethical non-monogamy or non-monogamy in some way? I wonder if Mormon/post-Mormonism would actually have a statistically higher prevalence, because I do have never Mormon friends that are like, opening your marriage, that's crazy. Like, I don't get a sense, and maybe I'm too close to it, but I'm not, I think it might be more prevalent in Mormon/ex-Mormonism than anywhere else. And maybe it's because things are so dysfunctional, or just it's the way the culture's developed, or maybe it's our polygamous roots. I don't know. But like, Chelsea, if you can speak on behalf of the many people you've talked to the extent that you can, what is it that takes people, or Mormons or ex-Mormons, from we've been messed up sexually, which I agree, we're a very sexually dysfunctional people. What is it that takes them from that to like, I know, let's open up our marriage? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, why that? Why non-monogamy if you even have any sense?
I guess I can just speak from personal experience, because I don't want to like bring anyone else into this conversation. I mean, when you're getting married, oftentimes in a Mormon marriage, it's at a very young age and it's on the foundation of the church. And so like for Nick and I, that was something that like, it was this foundation of, if you go to the temple, do all these things, then you will have a happy marriage. And clearly once you start to deconstruct, like, that's just not happening. So when you deconstruct the church, you also start to say like, oh, did we get married because of the church? Because the church kind of fed us these values and this timeline. You cannot have sex before you get married. So oftentimes people will rush that because it's a very natural progression to be intimate when you're close with somebody that you love. And so just being in a very monogamous marriage where you kind of are trying to explore sexually, I don't want to go into too many details, because I have been very graphic about my honeymoon in this chair with you several years ago. We had a very, very horrible like Mormon honeymoon. We were not educated. We didn't know how to receive or give pleasure of any kind. And I think you just start to get into these like habits, and these groups start to form these roles of like, pursuer, rejector, all of these things. And so sometimes I can see in these conversations when you're talking about sex that it might be helpful to have somebody who hasn't been in the situation, in the trenches with you, while you're navigating this very, very Mormon marriage where sex is always coming out sideways. And so I can see why people naturally want to open up, because they think maybe they resent that they didn't get options before getting married. Or that they feel like somebody could bring some fresh eyes into this situation that is just kind of very traumatic, and it's really hard to navigate through therapy. And so anyway, I can see why it's an option for people, because it's just really, really hard to navigate Mormon marriages that are monogamous, where you're just trying to claw your way out together,
Love it. Alyssa, thoughts you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think from just anecdotally as well, I just know that a lot of people, that's something that people will experiment with and will try. And, maybe the main reasons that I've heard people say will be along the lines of what Chelsea was saying, like people are getting married young. I was listening to an interview where Miranda McWhorter was talking about it. a little bit. And she just mentioned casually, like, we were in the middle of a faith crisis. Felt like there was so much for us to deconstruct. We chose to get married really young, and then now we feel maybe a little bit stuck. And this was kind of what she was suggesting or implying, or that like once you really literally marry somebody and you're committed to them forever, I think once you start deconstructing the church, the stakes of that feel really high. I think within Mormonism, marriage is so casual, and just the idea of eternity, which is kind of ironic, is really casual. And I think once you start deconstructing even just the concept of choosing one person forever or living with the same person forever, I think the stakes of that start to feel a little bit more severe. And so people, I think, are looking for ways to also be able to stay in the relationship and be in this happy relationship, and also explore things that they never had the chance to before. I think a big part of the post-Mormon experience, at least for me and the people that I've talked with, is like not just pertaining to sex, but pertaining to everything. Coffee, example, is I was never allowed to do this. Is this even something that I like? And I think a big part of deconstruction, period, is being able to ask the questions. Is this something that I'm interested in or not interested in? And the hard part, I think, about marriage and a monogamous marriage is you're not able to perhaps ask those questions in the same way, or at least that's like the perception is now. I think sexuality is so individual, but now your sexuality is tied to a person. And
usually there's kids.
Yeah, exactly.
So you don't want to disrupt your kids' lives.
The marriage. Anyway, I do think that so much of the Mormon deconstruction process is just being able to ask questions and figuring out, once the whole world is on the table for you, which pieces are you going to pick back up again? And sex is a part of that. And it seems like that is a way. Moral of the story, that I think everybody that deconstructs Mormonism has to figure out what to do about sex, because that is a huge problem for everybody. Purity culture is so intense. And then you have to figure out, how am I going to go forward with that? And some people will learn how to figure out sex more with themselves or with their partner, or opening up. I think that's just a struggle that every Mormon and ex-Mormon is forced to confront, because our culture is so dysfunctional sexually. And so I think that's just like a common way that people have to heal themselves from the sexual trauma,
or destroy themselves,
yes,
or destroy their marriage.
Like the intention perhaps going in is like, okay, I need to figure out what I'm going to do. And unfortunately, also, as we see in this show, when you don't have sex education and you just jump into soft swinging, and again, part of this interview with Miranda that I was listening to, and that Taylor has mentioned before, is there is no conversation that they were having. They really did not have the tools to be able to swing like ethically, or in a way that they were like having healthy conversations with their partner, or setting boundaries, or figuring out ways that, like, did you like this? Miranda was like, I never even, essentially basically saying, like, we never even considered if it was something enjoyable or not. It was just, oh no, now it's snowballed and now we're here. And I think that also is so Mormon, is being unable, even when we're trying to like be more sexually open, we still don't know how to talk about it. Yeah. And that feels very Mormon.
You pointed me to that interview of Miranda. What's the YouTube channel that she was on?
Vial Files.
What?
It's called the Vial Files.
Vial Files. And she's just basically like, yeah, a bunch of couples, we were getting together regularly. We started drinking a lot. And then, like, I think she said some of the husbands started asking some of the wives to kiss. And then it just kind of, while everyone's kind of intoxicated, just people started exploring. And, again, no education, no discussion of ethics, not super careful. And then just stuff starts happening and snowballing. And so anyway, Natasha, let's bring you in. So you are not just a marriage and family therapist. You've not only dedicated 20 plus years to working with Mormon and ex-Mormon populations, you are also a licensed sex therapist. And as I understand it, in your practice for at least a decade or more, you've worked heavily with Mormon and ex-Mormon couples that have explored ethical non-monogamy. First question is, I know we don't have a lot of data on this, but is it your impression, as I asked Chelsea, that there might be a higher prevalence of experimentation with swinging and or non-monogamy than sort of in the general population?
I would not be surprised if that was the case. We do not have data to support that. E&M is on the rise nationwide. It is also on the rise depending on your age group, right? So I would say people who are 30 and below are much more open to these kinds of relational structures looking different than people 30 plus. So that's kind of just been my anecdotal experience. And like Chelsea was saying, I think there's a difference between, practicing ENM and talking about ENM. I think many people are talking about it, at least having the conversation. I run an ENM group about twice a year, navigating successful, educated ENM. And without a doubt, probably about a third of the people that show up in those spaces have never tried it, have never done anything yet, but are curious, have been having conversations together as a couple, and they're being very intentional about if we would consider this, how would we go about it, and getting the education and I think resources that are very helpful in this regard. Even with what you just said, I mean, I have very strong opinions about this. ENM does not destroy marriages.
It can.
It does not.
It can.
What destroys marriages is lack of communication, lack of understanding sexual health principles, lack of consent. I am not okay blaming a particular lifestyle. I mean, monogamy ruins marriages then. I mean, we've got 50% of people who are getting, but again, I wouldn't blame monogamy for that, right? It's the underlying education, principles, communication, and community support that trends to make relational structures succeed or not succeed. And it doesn't matter what relational structure you're under. So that's kind of my base opinion. If you want to have me talk a little bit about why I think that this is an interest, I can definitely go into that.
Yeah. So, and of course, like you could say alcohol doesn't wreck lives, alcoholism wrecks lives, but there's some, we had Britt Hartley on recently, and she gave an episode on like 10 things not to do if you're recently leaving the church. Her number one thing was don't immediately open up your marriage. And again, I know there's nuance, Natasha, with what you're saying, that that it's uneducated, uncareful non-monogamy or swinging that can be harmful to a relationship. But I do think that alcoholism is a thing, and there's a certain number of people where if you introduce alcohol, doesn't matter how educated they are, how careful they are, they may just have a genetic disposition to just never really come back from something. And what I've seen is even with people that go to a therapist first and learn all the rules and learn to communicate, I've still seen it potentially explode catastrophically in their family. So that's why I know you're more experienced than me. I want to be thoughtful about this, but I think it's like, it can be like gasoline to a flame. And a lot of times I see couples thinking it's going to fix a broken relationship. And again, I've seen it sometimes become like gasoline to a flame. Now, so you can push back. You can tell me I'm full of garbage.
Yeah, no, I'm totally going to push back.
Yeah.
I think this is a very Mormon conversation we're having right now. I think comparing anything sexual to alcohol is a very Mormon argument. I've been hearing that since homosexuality in the 1980s. So I'm not comfortable with that. Alcohol is a very different thing. It's a chemical substance that will change certain aspects of your chemistry. Sex is different than alcohol or drug usage. And yet we don't shame people for drinking alcohol anywhere near the ways we do in regards to exploring ENM or any other type of sexual kind of outside of monogamous structures, the way we really police this. And I would say even these kinds of discussions where you're being influential to hundreds of thousands of people, you're leaving this kind of taste of like, ooh, this is dangerous territory. And I think that in of itself is a shame response. I love Brittany Hartley. I love you. Neither one of you are a sex therapist. I'm not sure why you're giving advice to people around sexual issues when that's not your scope of practice.
Wait, is it advice or just my impression?
I think that you're having a lot of impact. I think Brittany has a lot of impact. I think all of these shows have a lot of impact. And you're having these discussions without an expert on board.
Wait, you're on board?
Today, I'm just talking about this other conversation, right, that you're referring to. And I do think that, again, we ignore the depth of problematic relationships we already have before people are even bringing this to the discussion. It's kind of like being presented like E&M just came in and somehow destroyed this amazingly wonderful relationship that had 0 issues and that would have lasted towards eternity if they hadn't brought in this one dangerous substance. And that, yeah, I'm going to have a very strong reaction to that as somebody who has done a lot of work deconstructing sexual negativity, which is rampant in not only this show, but I'm not talking about Mormon Stories, the Mormon Lives, the Secret Lives of Mormon
It's a
Wives.
tongue twister.
It is so rampant in how they talk about themselves and how they talk about their experiences and how they talk not just about E&M, but the pornography issue and how the parents are, interacting with them. It is rife in sex negative culture. And when we talk about this in this way that just, I've talked to many people where it blows up, first of all, ignores the many, many people who do a beautiful job navigating ethical non-monogamy. It also ignores all the many people who practice it maybe for a while. It's a chapter of exploration for them and then return to monogamy. And it also ignores the fact that many of these people, I believe, would have divorced regardless.
Sure, absolutely. And Natasha, we're close friends, so in a way, I'm representing a side. I'm not even necessarily representing me, and in a way, I'm representing prevailing thoughts. So I love it that we're having this thoughtful conversation. I appreciate the pushback and your professionality, and I hope you feel no disrespect as we kind of engage in a dialogue where we're trying to do a lot of things, including dispel unhelpful stereotypes, right? And so sometimes I can't even represent those in my questions or positions, in addition to all my ignorance and problems.
Yeah, it's never an issue of disrespect. I don't feel disrespected. I feel like, nervous, right? And anxious because I'm like, here we go again, spouting biases around a certain lifestyle. And I've talked to so many people, which is the number one thing they feel harms them, right? Why can't these ladies even talk about this on this show? Is it because they don't want to talk about it? Is it because there wasn't pleasure involved? Is it because they're, no, the reason why, and they say it often, this is when the term Mormon comes up on the show. Well, but I'm Mormon and I hate talking about this, right? Like, I think it's Taylor who's just kind of like, I'm going to be open. I'm just going to throw it out there. And then is it Marissa? Is that her friend? Miranda, sorry. She's like, our parents are going to be watching this and our community is going to be watching this. And so you can see right away that the shame response, the thing that they're really pushing up against is the cultural standards that everybody around them is now going to slut shame them, is now going to say, this is bad for your marriage. Some of their marriages did break up. So now it's like, it just becomes like, see, this is what happens. Yeah. Ignoring the astronomical issues that are happening in these marriages to begin with. And even this whole idea that, people sometimes open up their marriage to try to fix it. It feels like that's a negative. And I'm like, why wouldn't you try everything to try to fix your marriage? Do you know how costly divorce is? And so when people come to my office and they're like, we don't know what else to do. There's maybe a sexual incompatibility or there's a long history of sexual trauma between us or sexual dissatisfaction. And we're thinking about this as a last ditch effort. I'm like, let's talk about that. Let's see if that could be something that could work. And if it doesn't, it sounds like you were already down the road of divorce anyway. Why not get creative? Why do we have to have these binaries of passionately, sexually together forever or toxically divorced and we can't even, hardly co-parent? It's like, we've got to get more creative, folks, right? And ethical non-monogamy is an option to already a problematic relational structure. Because if everybody wants to tell me monogamy is just so safe and risk-free, it is not. Yeah. All relational structures have challenges. The only positive that monogamy has is that it's very backed up by our legal systems, our political systems, our religious systems, and our family systems. So you don't face any challenge when you are trying to live a monogamous lifestyle. Whereas you do if you, for a long time, it was the homosexual lifestyle, right? I heard all the same arguments that I'm hearing right now against E&M are the same arguments that we used against homosexuals in the 1970s and 80s, and to try to not pass marriage equality laws, right? And all those things. So there's great stigma. When there's great stigma, sexuality usually doesn't do well, but it's not that type of sexuality's fault.
Yeah. Thank you, Natasha. I'm so glad you're here to advocate for your experience and for just all the people you've interacted with. So, and you know what? It's totally true that in this episode and in my experience in ExMormonism, like rack up all the taboos, like drinking, marijuana, drugs, adultery, pornography, whatever the taboos are. Like, I think swinging might be, or losing your faith, or being gay, or being lesbian, or being bisexual, whatever things might be taboos. Is it true, Chelsea and Alyssa, in your experience, that like swinging might be the most feared, the most stigmatized, the most toxic of all the kind of the stigmas? Alyssa, I'll let you go first. Or do you even have a sense for that?
You mean like currently? That's something that people
Yeah,
are
like
discussing?
in that interview with Miranda, she's just like Taylor came out and started saying swinging, and I'm like, I'm out because I've got believing Mormon family, and I didn't want anything to do with being associated with that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. No, to your point, I think that is something that holds a lot of stigma right now, especially. And like Natasha was just really saying, like queer relationships theoretically have much less stigma now. And I think there's, still progress to be made, but that has come a long way. But it is really interesting how in this interview and also just throughout the show, anytime they are talking about any of the non-monogamy, it comes out very, very shameful. And Miranda in particular, and granted, she is on a TV show and she clearly feels uncomfortable. And she has said that she didn't want to talk about it before anyway. But she seems just deeply embarrassed and is continually saying, we did this and we shouldn't have. I know it's so crazy. And that's kind of a lot of like the energy, I think, that even Taylor has a little bit too, is anytime sex comes up, they seem to be a little bit apologetic about it. I mean, maybe not totally, but that definitely seems to be an energy, I think, that we gravitate toward sometimes as Mormons, is like, even if we are trying to work through any sort of sexual trauma or purity culture, we will then be embarrassed or apologetic about it and have a hard time being able to just own that that is a part of life. And I think you can see that on the show a lot, especially like, I guess later we talk more about like orgasm and having sex parties. And there is just this kind of like nervousness that pervades all of the sex conversations, even though they're trying to say they're being sex positive, but it comes across like very gimmicky, I think, as a viewer, and very like, ooh, Mormons are freaky. And that was even a specific question that in the interview that we was just talking about was asked, like, are Mormons like freakier than everybody else? And anyway, I just think that's a way that the taboo is making people feel embarrassed.
Yeah. Chelsea, let's get you in. I know that these are heavy.
I think it's been really fun to watch people deconstruct this stigma. And I think I'm around a lot of people where it is less stigmatized and it is a softening, where Mormon marriage often feels like a cage. And I think people can really acknowledge that. And I think, supporting Natasha's claims too, Miranda's been very clear that her exploring with this soft swinging had nothing to do with her divorce with Chase. There were a lot of other factors at play. And so anyway, I mean, this is a conversation I'm currently having in my personal life. So I'm very like warm to this idea, where I just think there's a humility that comes with deconstructing Mormonism, of being so wrong about so many things and systems and traditions. And so I just, as someone who's been very, very impacted by purity culture, I just am constantly trying to stay open-minded to like ways that I'm wrong and ways that approaching a relationship have been very juvenile and infantilized in my personal experience. And so anyway, I've also seen, ethical non-monogamy be very, very rewarding for a lot of really close friends of mine. And so, and I think queerness is a big aspect, where there's just an expansive view where all these boxes have been deconstructed. So, it's really fun to be talking about sex here too with Natasha in the room, where Natasha was one of the first people talking about sex openly at Sunstone Symposium years ago, when I was still so terrified to do anything in my marriage and even deconstructing the church. And so anyway, I just think having therapy, a lot of my therapy appointments involve sex, almost all of them. So, and it's been years since I've left the church, and it just is still about sex, like confronting sexual shame.
I love it. Okay. A lot of people are wanting to know, what's the difference between soft swinging and swinging? I could take a stab at that only because I have friends that have done it, but does anybody want to take a stab at it first?
I'd say Natasha should take it away.
Do you have a sense for that, Natasha?
I think a lot of these terms are defined, obviously, by people in their own ways. My best stab at that would be that soft swinging would be kind of like doing things that we would have considered okay to do in dating life, or maybe even more than a little bit that would have been considered okay, right? But I've worked with a lot of actually practicing LDS folks. It's not just the deconstructing LDS folks who are interested in non-monogamy. There's quite a few people who are still very active and very involved in the church who are practicing in these things, which might come as a surprise to people, but this has been my experience for the last 20 years. This isn't even new. This has just happened. So I think in general, it's kind of like, well, waist up type of swapping, right? We're going to maybe kiss and make out. We're going to maybe touch erogenous zones in the chest area, but we're going to stay away from genitalia, or maybe stay away from intercourse, right? So again, this gets defined by different people in different ways. Where swinging, I think in general, just means any type of sexual activities on the table, as long as there's consent and people enjoy what's being proposed. Hopefully the consent is
there.
Yes.
Well, what I've often heard it begin by the husbands. Well, everyone's drinking. There's a close relationship between the people involved, and the husbands are encouraging their wives to kiss. And there's something about that kind of bothers me. So I want to let y'all. Do y'all have thoughts or feelings about this scenario that feels common to me, of husbands encouraging their wives to kiss as kind of that sometimes first step into uneducated, not necessarily informed, not necessarily ethical, alcohol-influenced non-monogamy that I've seen emerge in sort of post-Mormon culture. Any thoughts on that? Because that seems problematic to me, but anybody else?
It's hard to judge, like, if there's full consent from everybody, then I think like that, if that's something everyone wants to participate in, that's great. I think coming from a very Mormon power dynamic, which sounds like that's kind of what was happening in some of these relationships. Yeah, it does feel a little off as everyone's just slowly stepping into this territory. But it's really hard to judge from an outsider where we don't know all the details and how that situation came to be. But it does feel off when it is in the context of Mormonism, which...
What's off about it?
Of just the power dynamic of men and women and sexualizing women, where women have often been seen as an accessory to men, a helpmeet to men. And so I think just even orchestrating something where it's for the men's viewing can kind of feel off. But again, it's hard to make these sweeping judgments where none of us were in the room when it happened. So I don't.
But in the case of the interview with Miranda that Alyssa pointed me to, Miranda says we never really discussed it. It was nothing we planned. They certainly didn't go to Natasha and get the education, the workshops, the seminars. It's literally just they're spending a lot of time together. They're in Park City. They're all drinking, and then one night the husbands are encouraging the wives to kiss. And I think it was Taylor and Miranda. Is that right, Alyssa?
Yeah. And again, to agree with what Chelsea was saying, if everything's consensual, things are planned, amazing. I do think it just kind of taps into that idea of like fetishizing lesbianism in particular. And so I think that's why for me, that just like the concept of like a man asking two women to kiss for like the voyeuristic reason, even outside of this scenario that I don't know, but just like that concept, I think feels a little bit like it.
Well, and can I say this whole conversation feels very Mormon too, with the voyeurism of even just the show. Like, I don't think they needed to disclose all of the things that happened. That feels
Yeah, good
very
point.
Mormon coded with, since we're young children, we're in the bishop's office disclosing what we think about where we touch ourselves. Like, this whole conversation, I wish that they didn't have to go so into the weeds. I know a lot of the soft swinging between Taylor and Miranda's story was a matter of semantics of like, what does it mean when, Taylor's saying hooking up and Miranda, was saying one thing and Taylor was saying another. But I wish that they had the liberty to have some of that be private, because it does feel so Mormon to have to like confess and disclose to this whole group of women and the public what they're doing behind closed doors. So
yeah, because in that opening scene, the women, the secret lives, they're kind of sitting around in a circle.
yeah.
Miranda comes in, she's introduced for the first time in the season to the audience, and almost immediately Taylor, the topic comes up, and Miranda's like quick to say, no wieners were touched? Is that kind of what
Yes,
she felt like
liner.
she needed to say? Right.
Yeah.
And Taylor looked shocked, and all the women were like, whoa, that's not because apparently Taylor was basically saying swinging was happening, but Miranda's like, I don't know what anyone else did, but as far as I'm concerned, maybe I kissed Taylor and maybe there was some other soft stuff going on, but no wieners were touched. And you're saying why should that even be?
Well,
in the
yeah, and I
conversation?
guess they really built it up all season 1, and like online, their two, accounts were saying very different things. So I think it was a matter of like trying to put a pin in that. And I can see why people are like, we don't know who to believe, and it feels like someone's lying. But I think there was, like Natasha said, just a lot of shame, especially on Miranda's part. And I think trying to navigate this in a very public setting when she was feeling judged by a very Mormon family and friends, and she was having her own faith transition, her marriage was crumbling. So I can see why she kind of shied from that conversation, not to give her a pass on, if she was lying or whatnot. But I do wish that wasn't such a huge part of the conversation, in season 1.
Fair.
And I think too, even throughout this season, some of the women like reiterating multiple times, like, we need to get to the bottom of the swinging scandal. And the idea too that a couple of them say is like, in order to trust each other, we need to be able to be completely honest. That also feels very Mormon, that this like hyper confession, in order to have a friendship at all, we need to know every single thing that's happened, that like we need to know your sexual preferences for some reason. And I mean, I understand that there's some complexity there, because perhaps there was the claim is that there was dishonesty or there was lying, or there's this friendship breakup. But I do think just the idea in general that like, as friends, we deserve to know everything about each other. We deserve to know all the details. And like, that's the only way that we can go forward. And I think that also just becomes a theme generally, is really trying to police the concept of honesty. And I think that comes up with Jen a lot too. Both Jen and I think the swinging situation is something that they're really trying to get very exact details on. And I think that comes from such a Mormon angle also.
The accountability. Everyone's holding each other accountable constantly, but there's no path for repair. There's no path for like trying to reconcile. And so these secrets aren't really kept safe anyway. And so I think it's just kind of a volatile situation to be disclosing.
Totally.
And some of the disclosure doesn't feel like it's relevant at all to the actual relationships or the conversations. It does seem like like arguing about semantics at times, and they're not able to like move forward in that repair, like you were saying. But I think like as a culture, we love confessing, and we love holding people accountable and using that as this like pious way of saying I am doing this better than you. And that is also a way to like,
no, there is an assumption in the secret lives that like the ones who aren't experimenting with swinging or non-monogamy are somehow superior to the ones that did, and the ones who did are like repentant and they're sorry and they're not doing it anymore,
and they have to tell you every detail in order to like prove that they're sorry.
That's what Chelsea kind of you're saying. It's almost like the bishop
penitence. And like that comment from Demi, this is like later on in the season, and it's not a spoiler, but she's calling Taylor disgusting. And I think that Taylor really holds a lot of that stigma where people are calling her messy. And I think she's just been very transparent about her journey. And
she keeps saying trash. I feel like I'm trash.
Yeah. So anyway, I think they're really feeding that story that she has about herself. And it's really disappointing because I think that her honesty has been really brave. And I think to do this on such a large stage is just terrifying, especially including like involving faith, where like her family seems to be the most religious of the entire season. Like there's not a conversation that her mom's not bringing up the church, that they're having a one-on-one or in a group setting. So I think like their stakes are very, very high. And so
For sure.
Anyway.
Yeah. Let me just quickly say my staff's bugging me. We've got 700 people joining the live stream. Lots will join later. And very few of you have liked. There's only like 7 likes. So please take a second to like this episode, comment on it. It will really help the algorithms and help get this really important conversation that Natasha would agree. We need to beat down some of these stigmas. We need better education, but we can only do that if this episode reaches people. So please take a second to like this episode on YouTube. No one will know. Some people are worried about that. Natasha, let's get you in.
Life of Mormon Story likes.
No, but Natasha, let's get you in on this conversation.
Yeah, this is such a fascinating, complex conversation. I don't even know where I can go with my brain because it's wanting to go 500 different places. But
is punching me one of the places?
Yeah, no.
Maybe.
So never. Let's start with this question that you asked about how supposedly this went down, right? You're at a party, people are drinking alcohol. Now there's a group of men in particular in heterosexual relationships, somewhere between inviting and pressuring, their wives or other women in the room to potentially do something erotic. So let's break that down. I mean, could there be patriarchal power themes in there, like both of you have just mentioned? Absolutely. That is not unique to Mormonism, and that is something that should be addressed systemically, ongoingly. That's a conversation with the Me Too movement and everything that we're having as a country, and we're not doing very well in having that conversation, quite frankly. So that's an issue. The other side of that coin is another issue where how free are women in these cultures to be aggressive and initiate those kinds of playful things to begin with? I've heard sometimes women telling me, well, it's kind of nice that my husband takes the lead on that because otherwise I would feel slutty, right? The things that I want to do, I can't just come out and say them because then what are people going to think? So there's kind of like virtue monitoring, self-virtue monitoring, or, virtue monitoring of other people, of how women show up. And the slut shaming is alive and well, people, right? It's like, if I say I like to have sex, if I say I want to try something, if I want to be even crass in my language, oftentimes that's treated differently than if a male counterpart would do those same things. So that's something that we have going on in general. Ideally, how do I want people's sexual debuts to go, right? Like even their first sexual experience. Ideally, they would have had tons of comprehensive sexual education. They would have lots of people to talk to. They'd have access to lots of resources and good sex ed books. And they're very well, educated on sexual principles of health, consent, how to pause, how to know what to do in those moments where you kind of want to, but maybe you kind of don't want to, which is not the same as an enthusiastic yes, which is all we seem to know how to talk about. And although enthusiastic yeses are awesome, they're not very common, right? Most of us are kind of discerning as we're becoming sexual. How much of this do I want? Am I still enjoying it 5 minutes later? Was it as hot as when I thought about it versus what it is in actuality, right? So you're in the moment, you're negotiating a lot of feelings and thoughts with yourself, much less the other people around you. And so I would love for sexual debuts to have so much of that, including ethical non-monogamy debuts. The reality is that whether it's a teenager having their first sexual experience or a couple in their 50s having their first swinging experience, oftentimes that's not how it goes down. It goes down in the moment, right? Maybe we hadn't talked about it or thought about it, or maybe we are, enjoying a meal or a drink, or even, cannabis, which is legal in so many areas of the United States now, even recreationally. And so you're having all of these yummy things kind of enticing you, and now eroticism gets introduced, and you're kind of like, well, maybe, or this might be exciting, or I don't want to disappoint, right? The I don't want to disappoint is something we want to really tune into, because if you're doing things for not wanting to disappoint either your partner or other people in the group, we want to pay attention to that. That's not a great way to do anything that's sexual, right? And so, but we're not practiced. We don't have this practice. We don't have this culture. And therefore, lots of things can get messy. And people more often than not come in to see me when things have gotten messy than in preparation. I wish more people would come in preparation, but more likely than not, people come in when things have gotten messy. So we really want to even deconstruct that. What's going on there? Does it have to be this simple binary idea of the man once again pulled his patriarchal trump card? That may be a component of it, and we definitely want to address that, but it's usually much more complex than that. Whereas in a female body, and I know this very personally, I was never taught to really understand my arousal, my pleasure, my eroticism, my desires. I've been a fairly high drive person, except for during pregnancy and breastfeeding. Do not recommend for eroticism, but the breastfeeding part. Do recommend for babies, but not for your eroticism. And so it's hard to give yourself permission when the entire society has never given you permission as a female-bodied person to figure out what it is I want in that moment where my spouse that maybe I'm excited to excite, or other people are looking at me in a certain way, to make a decision that's going to feel fully autonomous and independent. Plus, the other thing I want to bring up is that if you are in faith deconstruction mode, or even if you're not, I would apply this to everybody. It's just, I think if you're in faith deconstruction mode, you're more self-aware, is we are developmentally stunted when it comes to sexuality. We were basically, we were encouraged to bypass sexual development from being pretty much an asexual 8-year-old to being a married 20-year-old, right? Those years in between, we were just supposed to sexually bypass everything that was going on in our bodies, in our hormonal shifts, in our puberty changes, in our crushes, in our identity formation, in our orientations, in our gender. All of that was bypassed. And so now when you're deconstructing, or maybe you're interested in soft swapping as an LDS person, whether you realize it or not, you're doing old developmental stages work, right? Things that we should have been practicing, testing, learning from in those kind of late teen to early emerging adulthood years. Most of us did not have a lot of experience. And if we did, it was under this umbrella of shame, not appropriate sexual development. It was like, oh, I shouldn't have, and now I'm dealing with my past from that perspective. So yeah, these moments where people are kissing at parties, and by the way, a few more thoughts. Research shows that actually in heterosexual relationships, it's more often than not the female who will bring the E&M conversation to the table. Again, I don't know if that applies to Mormon culture, right? But in general, it's usually the female who brings that topic to the table.
I did not know that.
And the few post-Mormon parties I have been at where I have been witness to these kinds of kissing things, it has been very female driven. The women get together, they're all having fun, maybe flashing their titties or doing some kissing. And it's almost like they're showing off. It's almost like they exclude the men. And it's almost, I get this feeling like, look at us and you don't get access to us because we are now encircling each other in this erotic energy that's between us women. So I've seen a lot of empowerment in that kind of, and I don't know if there was whisperings, like, hey, go kiss so-and-so. But I haven't seen that be so much a male-driven thing in the few parties I have been at.
And can I ask a follow-up about that to all of you, but Natasha too? Isn't it a pretty significant phenomenon that there are many, at least Mormon or post-Mormon women who, because they never were allowed to have normal, healthy sexual developmental experiences, whether that's masturbation or just dating men and women, are y'all seeing a decent number of questioning or ex-Mormon women realize that either they're bisexual or they might even be lesbian, and they never had a chance to even discover that? And so they're in the situation where they and or their partner have lost their faith. Maybe they have not had a healthy sexual relationship throughout their entire marriage. And many are finding that, whoa, who knew I'm bisexual? Or whoa, who knew I'm actually lesbian? And I just thought of myself as the lower desired partner or the lower libidoed partner. Did any of y'all seeing that or think it's Chelsea?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Just yes.
Okay. Like
Yeah.
significant?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I would agree. Seems pretty significant
Yeah.
from what I've seen too.
Okay.
Yes, I would agree as well. I think, first of all, we have research to show that for whatever reasons, whether it's cultural or biological, I don't think we know quite yet, but female sexuality tends to be more fluid. We do also trend as an overall culture to be more comfortable with female on female sexuality, like you mentioned, even it being fetishized. You don't get a whole lot of people in a group going, okay, you two guys, let's kiss, and we're all going to get aroused by watching the two of you kiss. So there's still a lot of homophobic kind of energies in the overall general, culture as well as the Mormon culture. And that's systemic, right? For whatever reasons, right? It's hot when Madonna kissed Britney Spears, right? It's hot but we don't see some male singer kissing another male singer and then that be eroticized by the whole community. So that's a homophobic systemic issue. There may be some biological, but I also think it's very environmental that women are allowed to have more erotic kind of energies towards each other without that being such a taboo within the overall culture. So some of that can be performative because women know that it turns on men, and some of that can be just very autonomous, right? And authentic, like this is actually something I enjoy. And what does that mean coming from a very heteronormative, rigid box that we come from in Mormon culture?
And so to your point, Natasha, when you're seeing some post-Mormon or questioning Mormon women initiating ENM, or at least the discussion of ENM, sometimes it comes out of that context, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And another issue that I see is that oftentimes in a heterosexual couple, the couple will be more, they'll be more okay with the female in that couplehood experimenting with other women, and even the male experimenting with other women. But then the rule or the agreement is we don't bring in other men, right? So in that sense, there's a threat response. That's a threat response, right? And especially the heterosexual man in that particular example may not feel threatened by his wife playing with another woman as he would maybe feel threatened if she was playing with another man, which again goes to a lot of sex negative stereotypes that we're dealing with regardless of your gender.
Yeah. This is a tiny bit of a spoiler. In episode 4, it starts out with Layla and her boyfriend Cameron, who's the son of a bishop. Layla's basically saying to Cameron, I've never had an orgasm before. Cameron, do you feel a lot of pressure now that we're sexually active to be someone who helps me facilitate my first orgasm? And the truth is, very close people to me in my life made it to age 35 or 40 having never experienced an orgasm at all. Is that also something any of you want to say is a deep, more, if it, it's probably a human thing, but it's certainly a Mormon or an ex-Mormon thing? Anyone?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think so. I think that Mormon women and women period are not given the opportunity or like allowance to explore. And so I think when Layla's in this situation, I also found it notable that a lot of that conversation revolved around like her and Cam's relationship. It wasn't even really Layla in this position or just like a woman being able to figure out her own sexuality and figure out like, what is it that I would like? Why is it that I, have had sex and I've had sexual experiences, but I haven't had an orgasm? Is this something that like, do I feel comfortable masturbating on my own? Is that something that I've even tried or considered? And I thought that was also interesting that like during this whole conversation around sex, there was no real like discussion or awareness at all of like what a woman could do for herself or figuring it out on her own at all. It was always like, okay, well now, Cam, you probably feel a lot of pressure, which I know is like a different dynamic, but it seems like there's two different kind of conversations happening. One is like, this is a new relationship, so they need to figure it out together, figuring out what they like together, etc. But that seems like a very separate conversation than the heart of what it seems like they were trying to get at, which is like Layla and I think a lot of women within Mormonism never being allowed or feeling allowed to explore their own sexuality or eroticism and figure out what turns them on and what they like on their own. And it was interesting how those two conversations seemed so blended here. And that also felt very Mormon too, where she kind of was like, I don't know what turns me on. I know that's probably really hard for you because now you've got to figure it out. And anyway, and then they did have the party in an attempt, I guess, to maybe like empower her a little bit. But
yeah, I mean, at the party, I don't know if it was a sex coach or a sex therapist. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on the party, Layla's sex party. But the coach essentially was saying, like, what turns you on or when do you feel aroused? And Layla wasn't able to answer. And for me, that felt very relatable, where I think sex is about creating an environment, you know, to be successfully aroused. And I think you need to center women's pleasure, which again, the church, that is not happening because women are not at the center in any conversation in the church. But like, you know, just being able to be in touch with yourself. And I feel like that's like when Layla said that, you know, that was kind of an emotional moment for me where I'm like, I have experienced that too. Like, I don't even know where I would put myself to to be in a state of arousement without like another person involved. I think it starts there. And so I like that they started to have that conversation. I feel like the party kind of got very weird vibes when, you know, I think there's some internalized homophobia, you know, making comments about how loudly, like, I am straight, I am heterosexual, and then making comments about being, you know, shackled by the coach of like, oh, I never thought this would happen by a woman, or, you know, just things like that, where I'm like, I think there's a lot of deconstruction still to be done in that room and at that party. But I think they were starting to have some good conversations for Layla's sake. But I don't know, did you watch that scene yet, Natasha?
Yeah, no, I thought that, like, I don't know her, and
Yeah.
it sounds like she's more in the coaching kind of realm of things and educational realm of things and the therapeutic side of things. And I thought her questions and her activities were really good and interesting. And I think the part that you're talking about is when weren't they supposed to rub each other's hands
and the
figure out
feather.
what feels good, right? And so I've had to do that in trainings, right? Where somebody's teaching us a concept and they're like, okay, turn to the therapist next to you and figure some of this stuff out. And especially with the hand massage and consensual stuff and being able to talk about that. And even for me, with all the training that I have, I still find myself uncomfortable in those spaces. And so I can't imagine for these young women who've never had anything like that to now have that eroticism that they've probably very strictly put into a certain box, that I could even enjoy a sensation that doesn't have to be sexual, but that I'm just learning what feels good texture-wise against my skin. They can't separate that. Oh no, that's got to be a sexual thing. And that's where I think you see all that anxiety coming forth. Like, how can I even accept a touch from a friend who's a woman and who isn't my husband, and even consider whether or not I would like that? So that just speaks to the inability to really compartmentalize in healthy ways the many aspects of our eroticism and sensuality. I should be able to give you a hand massage, Chelsea, and you tell me whether or not you like it or not, right?
Yeah, that's great. Let's switch spots, John.
without you and me worrying about whether or not it's going to be sexual, right?
Yeah.
That should be something. And you should be able to tell me, oh, I like that pressure, or I like that. Can you go a little softer? Can you go a little harder? Can you actually, how about this can you do my thumb where I kind of hurt from punching my computer, right? You should be able to tell me all those things, and for it to be very comfortable between you and I, because we understand that this isn't a sexual moment, but it is a moment of pleasure. And I think we don't really know how to separate those things. Like, anything that could potentially even look like a sexual encounter now has to be put in that box, and I've got to monitor it, and I've got to gatekeep it, and I've got to make sure everybody knows that it's appropriate, right?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point.
Yeah.
And Chelsea, you reminded me to mention, I was reading your Substack recently, and you mentioned Amy McPhee-Olabest's Breaking Down Patriarchy episode with Celeste, where they talk about centering women's pleasure. I think you linked to that episode.
Yeah.
And that was a fantastic episode. So I just want to give a shout out to Breaking Down Patriarchy, to
Yeah.
Celeste, but also to your Substack.
Oh, that's nice.
I think you had a Halloween episode where you also talked about.
I talk about sex a lot online because
Yeah.
it's something I'm just purging where I
Yeah.
just don't want to do it alone. I feel like the
Yeah.
isolation and secrecy really adds to the shame. But yeah, they, Amy and Celeste did an episode on why so many Mormon women think that they're asexual. And that's not to like stigmatize asexuality, but just a disconnect from any type of knowing how to communicate what you want, what that could look like. And so they really dive into some of the history. It's like 18 minutes long. It's a really great deep dive. So,
But so is your Substack. So is it okay if I plug that
sure,
too? All right.
sure.
Okay. So
Can I say something really quick
Sure.
before we move on? So I
Yeah.
just want to say anorgasmia and genital pain are both more common in religious conservative communities. That is backed up by the research.
that's not being able to have an orgasm as a
Yes.
woman
And then the
or pain
orgasm
with
gap,
sex, right?
correct. And the orgasm gap is alive and well everywhere, right? So I think nationwide to every, 100 male orgasms, we're getting about 70 to 80, somewhere around there, of female orgasms. So that is an issue. And again, not that every sexual encounter needs to end in orgasm.
Right.
Sometimes people are like, I don't want to go that far, but I'd like to erotically spend some time with you. So that's fine too. But I'm just saying there is an orgasm gap nationwide, but in religiously conservative communities, there's a higher number of these issues of not being able to orgasm and also genital pain.
Love it.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't want to, I sense that as we continue this episode in future episodes of Mormon Stories where we cover this, that I hope some of you or all of you will be able to continue with us. We'll be talking more about non-monogamy and or swinging and or soft swinging. I do want to cover a couple other topics before we have our hard stop at noon. But before I end, let me see if Natasha, you and I can agree on at least one thing. Would you agree, or at least one important
We
thing?
only agree on one
One
thing.
important thing.
What?
One important thing to tie up today's discussion of soft swing. Would you agree that it's probably ill-advised for a newly questioning couple coming out of a high demand religion to mix alcohol and just spontaneous swinging without getting some sort of therapeutic or education around what ethical non-monogamy is? Can we agree on that maybe?
Yes, I would generally agree with that.
Okay.
At
Yay,
the same
we
time,
did it!
at the same time.
No, let's pause. Let's
let her
pause.
finish,
She
let
said
her
yes.
finish.
We agree. We have consensus on something
We have
important.
consent.
But let's touch this.
Yeah,
We're holding
okay,
hands.
we're holding
modeling.
hands. Here's what I will say. I mean, ideally, we would pace all kinds of things. If somebody's going through a really big change in their life, my number one piece of advice is let's not make any huge decisions right now, right? So like give it a little bit of time, pace it out. Try one thing at a time. Like if you're going to try alcohol, how are you going to try that? How are you, if you're going to try cannabis, if you're going to try, E&M stuff, if you're going to try even something as simple as taking off your garments and wearing clothing that people can tell you're not wearing your garments, that has a visceral response in your body, right? So let's pace things. So yes, I would. And my concern is, because this is what we do in Mormon land all the time,
Totally.
is that we put out the ideal. This is how it should be.
Yeah.
This is how you should do it.
Yeah.
And then half the people listening are like,
Yeah.
well, shit, I already messed it up. I already didn't follow that advice.
I mean,
right?
honestly, the stigma's so bad on swinging and non-monogamy that like that in and of itself is going to be a barrier to people going to you or reading a
Yes.
book
Right.
or even talking about it
I
as
don't
a
want
couple.
people to feel
So it's
stupid, right? Or like, oh, what did we
Right.
do? Or we fucked
100%.
it all up. Or
100%.
I'm like, just come and talk to me, or somebody who's, like affirming of E&M and knows what the hell they're talking about, because tons and tons of therapists are not. And tons of therapists will weaponize things like attachment theory and will weaponize trauma to explain why you're interested in these kinds of events, which, and many of them are also religiously biased therapists themselves. And so you want to be really careful where you get your information, who you go to for help. And I don't care how bad you think you've messed it up. It's not doomed.
No,
it's
for
not
sure.
over.
I love it.
And how do we have conversations, and what did you learn from those experiences? Because even if you feel like you messed up, that's valuable information.
Totally.
And how do you not, in our culture, when we mess up, it's not valuable information. It's like horrific. It's something you need to
Mhm.
repent from. It's not worth anything good, right? But no, actually, our mistakes, our regrets are beautiful sources of information to help you figure out what you want to do next. So that's the caveat.
I
would
love
add to
that. Sources of information. I feel like, yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's
And
much kinder and more compassionate than the Scarlet Letter
Yes.
for Mormonism.
Yeah.
Right.
yeah, moving from a sin and shame model to a learning model, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Which
And-
goes back to even this show. Like, I don't know if they enjoyed what they did. I don't know if they wanted to do what they did. I don't know how they felt afterwards. I don't know the intersection of their guilt being tied to their Mormon beliefs versus their actual, like selling themselves short. Those are very two different guilt forms, right? And there's just no curiosity about any of those things. Those things are not things people are asking about. They're just like, yep, you're trash. You're right. I'm glad you agree. Now you can get on the repentance, bucket and we can move on. And I'm like, wow, just such a loss of opportunity.
Love it. Thank you all three of you, for being willing to have a delicate conversation, because I'm learning a lot. So thank you. Okay, I don't want to leave our discussion of episode 1 without talking about a couple of other things. And one is Zac and Jen getting together to have a little bit of a reconciliation. Now, Alyssa, or all of you may have noticed that Zac cuts his hair. I think that's worth mentioning. But what did y'all think about the reconciliation, at least the initial one in episode 1, where Zac seems to be trying to apologize to Jen? Any thoughts about that? Did you buy it? Do you think Zac is really contrite? Do you think he's totally just going after the bag? Is he cloud chasing? Chelsea, what do you think
I know
about?
some people joked that his suitcase was empty and it was like a facade of like, just stage this for repair. But I would like to hope that, I would love to hope that it's genuine. I think I'm always rooting for people who are trying to claw themselves out of the small thinking of Mormonism. And I think like the last season was really hard for their marriage. Like Zac details people, like hundreds of people telling him death threats, and everybody collectively rooting for their demise as a couple while they're both navigating a faith transition. Like that's an incredibly painful thing. And so I have a lot of empathy. I feel like the conversation was good in that, like, it reminded me of that moment from season 1. Do you remember when Jen was talking to Zac on the phone at Chippendales, and she was like crying, saying like, can you just see me as a human? And I know that that moment resonated with a lot of my friends who have felt like that in their own marriages. And so for her to get specific on ways to do that, of validate me, hear me, like prioritize my feelings because I don't feel like I'm prioritizing this relationship, I think that was a good starting conversation. Whether he's genuine or not, it's just hard to make that call. But like, I'm hoping for the best for both of them. And as they're deconstructing, I know her mental health has really tanked every episode that she's in this season. So I just hold them with compassion, because having that conversation on such a big stage so intimately, and I know his family had a lot of feelings about the first season, that's just got to be really painful.
Yeah, so many questioning or ex-Mormon women that I've talked to will say, yeah, my husband has thoroughly deconstructed Mormonism, but they have not even started to deconstruct patriarchy. And it seems like that Zac Jen conversation is like, hey, can we be equal?
Yeah.
Which is what feminism, that's all it is like, can we have equality? So I think it's important. Alyssa, thoughts?
Ooh.
Is that a lot? Is this heavy
no.
for you?
I'm just saying it's just a tricky one.
Yeah.
I think just for them. I think, well, okay, if I'm trying to look at it from the most optimistic perspective, and I think that like there could be some truth in this too, is, well, I think we can't, as viewers, the way that the Zac and Jen's relationship was portrayed last season was quite atrocious, and we don't know everything about their relationship. It has been a year, and I think then jumping into reconciliation, that feels really nice. But I think it's also important to not just immediately forget just how horrific it was, or at least, again, how it was portrayed on screen.
He was kind of a villain.
He was horrible.
He was quite horrible.
Yeah.
And I think in the best case scenario, we have a guy who does horrible things, and then on a national scale has thousands of people telling him he did horrible things, and then he realizes, oh wow, maybe I made some pretty severe mistakes. I'm going to start the deconstruction of patriarchy process. And of course, trying to be empathetic again, I understand that that is not a overnight switch, that some of those splinters of patriarchy are going to continue to seep through.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah. And I still feel really frustrated by a lot of his behavior, even in this first episode.
Like what? I don't mean to put you on the spot.
No. I'm just thinking, like, I can see, and I'm trying not to come at this just like, I'm trying not to come across like, he's just the worst. They should get divorced, because of course they have children, they have a complicated situation. And
you see him as like fundamentally problematic.
I do.
At his core.
I don't think he can. I think people have the ability to change. I'm not saying that is impossible. I'm just saying at this stage, I didn't feel like I saw a lot, and at least was shown that was like, oh yeah, there's a lot of real change that I can see the steps happening. I was really proud of Jen for being able to give like the list of things that she wanted to have change, being able to say, I need you to see me in this way, I need you to validate my feelings, XYZ. I thought that was fantastic. But like, even in the first 2 minutes of them seen together, Jen had set the boundary of saying, I'm going to go back to Utah, I'm choosing mom talk, I want you to stay in Arizona. And he broke that. I mean, I know he's trying, it seems like he's trying to do this gallant thing of like, oh, I'm going to do the it reminded me of just like a common abuse cycle of the big heroic grand gesture. I'm dropping out of med school and I'm moving back home. Well, she didn't ask you to move back home. In fact, she specifically asked for space.
And he's like, I want to move in, basically, right?
As soon as he walks in the door, he's like, she's like, isn't this a nice spot? And he's like, yeah, I'd like it to be my spot too. And granted, a minute later, she does say, okay, like we can try it. And I think there's a lot of potential there. Great. Awesome. And again, like I said a second ago, some of that first comment could just be his instincts kicking in. That doesn't mean he's irredeemable. But as a viewer, I'm not like, yeah, they're bad. I totally believe that this has potential to become healthy in a reasonable amount of time. Also, I think what I, as a viewer, I was thinking would have been amazing also is I'm thinking about the med school thing, how he's deferring, and he's like, I'm here. He kept saying that over and over again. I'm here for you. I'm here for you. Like, isn't that enough? Even though she had quite literally said she wanted to be separated, but that's a sad point. She also said she was lonely, so I can understand how he's, feeling like he's trying to be present, which is also good. But the problem, from my perspective, what we didn't see, and maybe this conversation happened, I'm just giving like a million disclaimers. Maybe this conversation happened off screen. We have no idea. But the reasoning for deferring med school, I think, really matters. If he was like, I'm going to defer med school because med school is extremely emotionally and physically exhausting and time consuming, and I don't think I can really work to deconstruct all this patriarchy while I'm in the middle of med school. I don't think I have the bandwidth or the capacity to do that, which is why I'm going to defer a year. I'm going to see, I'm going to do XYZ. These are the things that I'm realizing I'm needing to do to actually make active changes as a person. And I would love to do that alongside you. I understand if you need more space, I can stay in Arizona as long as you need me to. And then maybe, I can come back and
or find an apartment in Utah and live separately.
Yeah,
right?
We can still be exactly like, what would make you feel comfortable? I really value this relationship, but I understand that in order to make this relationship work, I have to be less of a dick. So I'm going to like deconstruct like these couple things, because he mentioned casually like, oh, well, the church, expects men and women to do certain things, but there's not. But then later, his main criticism of the church is not about the patriarchy. It's that he was feeling bullied, which is also horrible. And I think multiple things can exist at the same time. This person was treating Jen horribly, and I don't think we could just give him a pass. And we don't send death threats in DMs, people. Like, and this is embarrassing happening on a screen. Like, I can see all of these things existing at the same time. And I feel like just giving him a pass because he was treated horribly by the public, which is bad, doesn't necessarily mean that like the deconstruction that we're seeing in episode 1 feels like anywhere near complete yet.
Totally.
Has
Yeah,
potential. Sorry, that was like a really
agree.
long one.
No, I loved it. And Michaela mentioned right off in the first episode that she makes more money off one brand deal than her husband does in his entire year.
Yeah.
And can we discount the fact that Zac's like, med school for 10
Right.
years, a lot of hard work, or like gravy train, Jen the gravy train? Like, I don't mean to be projecting that onto him, but I mean, I think it's a valid question. Thanks for that, Alyssa and Chelsea. Natasha, any thoughts on episode 1 of Jen and Zac?
Is that all we're talking about? Is episode 1? So I need to be careful, right? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we're trying to. We're
Okay.
trying to. I hope to do maybe 10 of these
Right.
episodes.
Right. Okay.
Chelsea's
Yeah,
laughing.
no, I definitely see problematic behaviors there, especially from season 1. I think the problematic behaviors are actually quite common in our culture. So I don't think that he's a one-off, right? I think that his ability to center himself and, his sins are to be forgiven and her sins are catastrophic, are typical themes that we see in kind of active believing LDS couples. And not all. I mean, there's wonderful men in LDS culture that are not like this at all, who are believing men, but there are many who kind of are grown up with this kind of entitlement. I don't even think it's conscious, right? It's not like he's waking up every morning, how can I ruin my wife's life? But it's just an entitlement of how the career should be focused on him, the move should be focused on him, and his comfort needs to be centered. And I see him now trying to maybe shift some of that. I think it's very interesting that they're going through a faith transition, and what that will come out of it. As you said, you deconstruct Mormonism, but you don't deconstruct patriarchy. I don't think you have deconstructed Mormonism if you haven't looked into patriarchy. At the same time, we can join the mainstream world, which most of them will be like, oh yeah, you believe Joseph Smith was a prophet, we're with you. He wasn't, right? So the mainstream world is going to help us deconstruct that. When we try to deconstruct patriarchy, we enter the mainstream world and patriarchy is still very alive and well. So it's not like we have this, we left it behind and now we can get into something new. I mean, we still have a pay gap wage, right? I mean, we still have tons of issues. We elected a felon president instead of a capable woman. You're not going to be able to ever convince me that there wasn't some gender issue there, internalized misogyny that we have as a country. So the patriarchy deconstruction is much more complicated. I don't feel like I've completely deconstructed it myself after many years of attending many gender diverse classes, many ways that I've trained myself to have more of a feminist lens, which of course the majority of the public isn't doing that type of deconstructive work, which I would invite us all to be doing that work on an ongoing basis. How is patriarchy still showing up? The way it recently showed up for me, which I couldn't believe the words were coming out of my mouth as I said them. I was like, shit, Natasha, you've got a lot of work to do. I think it was a few years ago. I said something like, I think I find men more interesting to talk to than women. And as I was saying it, I was like, wow,
Yeah.
Natasha, wow, you've got, what is that about? So off to therapy I went.
And we've all got stuff that
Right?
just kind of comes up like whack-a-mole. You're like, I thought I figured some of this out. And then it just surfaces in different ways. And I think in an intimate relationship, it surfaces even more intensely than like friendships and stuff. So
Yeah.
I know that's a lot, like really intimate work to be doing.
Yeah. The last thing I'll say about Jen, which I'm concerned about, is that her girlfriends are calling her out. I'm not sure if this is season 1 or whatever, but I think it started even last episodes, is that she's being called out for lying, And when people are first of all, lying is endemic in Mormon culture. We are all lying. Even though we fetishize honesty, we are all lying. What are we lying about? Our true feelings, because we need to show up happy. So I'm not saying lying like, I like big lies. I'm just talking about even lies about how we're feeling. We've got the constant smiles on. Even all the plastic surgery is a lie. All the ways that we present, we're just not presenting authentically. And so there's tons of people-pleasing dynamics happening. And although I like to remind everybody it's healthy to be somewhat of a people pleaser, otherwise you're a sociopath, it can be out of balance. And so you can see her presenting in a certain way in one setting, and you can see her presenting in another way in another setting. And I don't think that's because she wakes up in the morning going, I think I like being a liar. I think it's self-protective, right? Because she can only be so safe to share certain things in certain contexts. And this is a prime example of understanding, because I think lots of us do this. And so if we can self-reflect, how does this show up in my life? It's not so much about Jen. She can figure that out on her own. But it's like, how are we all participating in similar structures? Because I don't want to disappoint people. I don't want people to be angry with me. I want to be perceived a certain way. And therefore we quote unquote lie or disclose. Or what's the word? Like when you don't lie, but you don't say this, you don't say the truth. What's that word? Why can't I think of that?
Like
Anyway.
omission.
Omission. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. So we just don't say things. So I think, and I'm a little saddened that maybe the girlfriends can't see that a little bit more, and instead of taking it so personally, say maybe there's a bigger systemic issue here that we need, as they're constantly saying they value good friendship. I think this is how women can be good friends to each other, is instead of like, I'm pissed that you lied to me, it's like, what's happening here that honesty can't be more flowy, and what are you afraid of? Because usually lies have to do with fear.
Love it.
I love that. And I feel like when I was watching these first couple episodes, I really see myself in Jen, partially because so many of the women this season are very like assertive and spunky. And I think like when I was younger, I think Jen is just much softer, much more of a people pleaser. It's so obvious. And I think so much of the Mormonism is coming out that way through her. And I think like I can see the younger version of myself in that. And also in this like almost, and this is something I've actually tried to like deconstruct, an almost inability to lie about really dumb things because I don't want to make anybody even a tiny bit uncomfortable. And I think that's something that we see with Jen, and she's getting called out for, but she almost doesn't know how to stop. And that felt very Mormon to me too. I remember thinking like, just like a really silly example, people would be like, hey, have you seen this movie? Or I was like, oh, I love this movie so much. Have you seen it? And I'd be like, yeah, just instinct, because I know they're excited about it. And I just wanted to like join in. And there's no reason to lie about having seen a movie. But I think that so much of Jen in the conversation, we see her just saying, yes, that sounds great. Or, oh, fun, so many times. And they do all these like dramatic flashbacks. And I think the second episode of being like, see, we caught Jen lying because she seemed happy in this moment. And I think that's just like a really good example of this like people pleasing that she doesn't know how to get out of. And that feels so apparent in our culture overall. And it is, I agree, disappointing that like the other women who are a part of that culture, but that maybe have a little bit, are a little bit more comfortable with conflict maybe, or are not offering her like that grace, which I think is one of the most disappointing parts of this whole series, is probably just the way Chelsea put it really well, just the way that the women are kind of fighting for the limited amount of power. And we see it kind of coming out, I think, in belittling Jen for pretty minor errors. Anyway.
And that would have been a really powerful conversation if Jesse, Demi, and Jen were to get in a room and be like, tell us what's happening in your body. Because it could also be the power dynamics at home. She feels like she has to be one way with him, and then she can be a different way with her friends. Like the whole Chippendale Halloween thing, she was like excited with her friends because maybe she would be more comfortable with this, but knowing Zac wouldn't, like coming home and not wanting to have that conversation, like that makes perfect sense. Faye transitions, I think we're all chameleons depending on who we are with at the time. So anyway, that could have been a really powerful moment if the three of them sat down and really, rather than just like taking Zac's side on everything, could have had that empowering female moment that they keep claiming is happening on the show.
Well, and especially when I think many of them have had abusive dynamics with
Yeah.
men. But yeah, in general, women were not really, we are very close and we'll rally, but we are also the ones that will tear each other down the most. Women will tear women down more than men will tear women down. And that's an offset of patriarchy. Because our own safety and our own resources are threatened by other women. And so that's a systemic thing that I know they're trying to fight that on this show. That's kind of like their mission. And I'm glad they keep talking about it, because I'm hoping they'll be reminded of their values as they interact with one another.
Well, we're I think we have time to maybe explore one more topic before we kind of have a hard stop. So since we've been talking about Jen and Zac, I think it might make sense to go ahead and talk about the ketamine little appointment that Jen and Zac had a little bit later in the episode. We've covered psychedelic use on Mormon Stories historically. We did an episode with Stephanie Brinkerhoff that's like Mormon Mom on mushrooms, but also I think I'd say over 50, there's two super prevalent storylines that show up in almost everyone who applies to Mormon Stories podcast. And one is super dark. Pretty much every woman who's ever applied to Mormon Stories has an abuse story in their story. Pretty much everyone. Or trauma story of some type. And I don't mean to be flippant about that. But the other is if they're ex-Mormon, they've probably had some sort of psychedelic experience that normally they would describe as life-changing. And so on the one hand, I have so many friends who just bear testimony with almost religious zeal about their mushroom experience, their ketamine experience, their ayahuasca experience, their even MDMA or the cactus Native American
Ayahuasca?
peyote, so I am validating to all my Mormon and ex-Mormon friends that testify to positive psychedelic experiences. And I don't know that the research is fully there. I think a lot of those experimentations are not necessarily with medical professionals, and they're not necessarily done as evidence-based treatment. And so I think, and they're almost all illegal. So I think we have to be careful about how we talk about this. Having said all that, and Natasha, as I understand it, last I heard, your Symmetry Solutions actually provides ketamine treatment. Is that right?
Yes.
Do you still do that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we got the training last February. We've been offering ketamine assisted psychotherapy and guiding counseling for a year and a half now, almost. Yeah. Loving it.
So with all this context, Jen and Zac do a ketamine session together. And I'd love to hear what y'all think, both about what you've experienced and or seen, but also with Jen and Zac's experience. And maybe Chelsea, I'll have you go first on this one.
Okay, I guess
if you want.
Yeah, watching it, it was funny because the online commentary is like, wow, these people can't drink coffee, but they can do ketamine, just like trying to make sense of all of the things. And I think they were very transparent of like, I don't know if they said like the church doesn't quite endorse this, but
it said somewhere that the church is gray. It's a gray area.
Yeah. Anyway,
which is true. The church hasn't come out against psychedelics. In fact, I've met currently serving bishops and stake presidents that do psychedelic trips. So,
yeah, but it is definitely something that I've seen anecdotally that's been really, really helpful in the post-Mormon space. It's been really helpful in my personal life. I think there's something like about the somatic experience where talk therapy is helpful, but I think, especially like with OCD or something where that could be like a neutralizing behavior, something that's out of body is really kind of an expansive experience. And it looks like on the show that it was very connecting for both of them. She asked him to come cuddle, which we were watching it in my backyard for an outdoor viewing, and everybody was booing because they didn't want, people have a lot of big
Zac
feelings.
to go away.
Well, yeah, I think like Zac does have a lot of healing to do, but anyway, it just looked like it was like really helpful that like they were reaching back into core memories that brought them a lot of joy and connection. And that has been my experience as well. So
the one thing that Zac says that's triggering to me on behalf of the women that I've talked to coming out of Mormonism is this idea we were meant to be together, right? Which is encoded as what? Like priesthood wise or like inspiration wise. Why is that a problem? You said yes. Why is that a problem?
Well, it feels like it was not even her choice. Like it doesn't even feel like consent. It's like this was the plan. You need to stick to the plan. We agreed on this. And I think that line has been weaponized for a lot of women, especially like dating and getting married, where people will use prayer or their patriarchal blessings or something to say like this needs to happen. So yeah, that's really off-putting. And he does have a lot of those Mormon zingers in his pocket ready to go.
Alyssa?
Yeah, and I noticed that it was just interesting too. I just noticed that was Jen's reaction also in that moment. I think that is just, maybe what we reach to when we're feeling like connection is like she said, oh, I prayed. I think it was this scene, right, where she said that she prayed, like a month before they met and God brought them together. So anyway, I just thought that was like an interesting thing to note too. I don't have any more to really contribute about the ketamine element, but I do think like, and I was also thinking like, well, they were talking about, I guess I had mixed feelings on the way that they were talking about these memories. Because on the one hand, I think that's beautiful. I'm really glad that they were able to like have this connective experience. It sounds like it's been really useful. I have heard many people that talk about how useful it is. And I hope that, I don't think like relationship repair is necessarily built on like, let's forget about all the shitty stuff that happened because we had a really fun time in Hawaii. So let's just focus on like this
Like
one
bypassing
day.
the healing process.
Exactly. Yeah. So theoretically, they're not bypassing the healing process because they're doing this, but we'll see, I guess. But
Natasha, how about you?
Yeah, I was glad to hear that they were open to that format of treatment and see what comes of it. Generally speaking, what I see come from it is an interruption of negative patterns, right? And that would be helpful for them, and also maybe to be able to talk about certain things without the same visceral reactions, right? Because ketamine, in particular, is a dissociative. And why it's so beneficial for trauma work, because we carry trauma very viscerally in our bodies. And so ketamine in some ways gives us a break from that and helps us to consider things outside of that trauma response that is kind of with us 24/7. And so I'm not saying it's a magic pill. I don't think like, you take it and all of a sudden your life is dramatically different. It still takes a lot of things, but it does kind of calm a certain visceral reaction, and it allows for different patterns to emerge. And I think it really lessens defensiveness. And I've used it with couples as well, where I don't have them both on the ketamine at the same time. For me, that hasn't been as successful as having them witness each other on the ketamine and be able to have conversations that they wouldn't necessarily be able to have without a certain level of defensiveness. The defensiveness just comes way down. And that's been really, really powerful in work with couples.
Love it. And I guess it's fair to say that trying to be balanced, that number one, again, this can be illegal, although ketamine assisted therapy is legal.
Yes, right.
And
it depends on the
evidence-based.
state.
Is that right?
Right. I mean, psilocybin is legal in Oregon, right? So it depends on the state. And so finding out, like even cannabis, is it's medically legal here in the state of Utah. It's not recreationally legal. So, and I think that's why LDS folks in general are open to these kinds of treatments, because even though, we're not okay with coffee, we are okay with a prescription, right? And it's kind of like why people are okay with getting an antidepressant instead of like drinking booze, right? Or whatever it is, which in that case, I think that's probably a better choice to deal with depression. So we do have kind of a scientific friendly bias in LDS land. I wouldn't say it's always there, like in sexuality, it's not there. We still can't normalize that masturbation is healthy for our bodies and for our psyches, even though there's plenty of research showing that. But I think when it comes to medicines in particular, people are more comfortable with that in LDS land.
And do you have a sense, I know you care about evidence-based treatments. Ketamine treatment is evidence-based to some degree?
Yes, otherwise it wouldn't be approved, obviously. So it's very evidence-based for depression, for suicidality, and it's also garnering quite a bit of evidence for trauma, which is why I was so interested in it, working with so much sexual and religious trauma in my practice.
And I hope y'all are all okay with me saying that casual experimentation with psychedelics can have negative consequences as well. And so you don't just want to think, I'm just going to do all the psychedelics because they're going to help fix all my problems, correct? There's risks.
Yeah, there are. I mean, there's like, people call them bad trips, and that can be scary and difficult. And again, depending on the context and who is guiding you and where you're at. And I think there's a lot of things to be intentional and careful about with any substance.
Yeah. Beautiful. All right. So I think we have time for one more quick topic. Let's not let's not have an episode without talking about Taylor a little bit. Is that okay? Alyssa's here for
Yeah,
that.
it's like we can't. Taylor's like the main woman here.
So let's
She's at the front.
quickly talk about Taylor's confrontation of Jenna at Macy's house. So who wants to set this up, or do y'all want me to set this up? Basically, do you want to, Alyssa?
Either way, we're
Go for it.
Yeah, basically,
What's the
end of
background?
last season, we end with Macy calling a woman named Jenna, who we know had some sort of relationship with Dakota, who is Taylor's baby daddy. Dakota and Taylor had a big discussion. Basically, Taylor was saying, if you had been with Dakota at if you had been with Jenna at any point during our relationship, then I'm done. And Dakota was adamant that he had not. But then we find out that this woman named Jenna appears in the picture and the timeline is blurry. And so they decide to meet. And so Jenna comes over to Macy's house. And
is it fair to say it's sort of Taylor confronting a possible, quote, other woman to her, the father of her children, potentially very explosive.
Yeah.
Right.
And the dynamic between the three women, I was very impressed. I think they did a great job at not villainizing Jenna, not making her seem like homewrecker or whatever. That like Dakota is the one who was in the relationship. He was the one who owed Taylor anything, you know. Jenna it seemed like she didn't even know that Dakota was with anybody else. Anyway, basically Jenna hands Taylor her phone, and Taylor looks through the messages and the timeline and realizes that Dakota had lied quite a bit.
That basically he had, I think, had sex with Taylor at least 3 times in a 1-week period in the evenings while sort of hanging out with Jenna during the day. And this comes out in future episodes in a very heartbreaking way.
And Taylor's just really, she responds, she's extremely devastated. It's a hard moment to watch. It seems like she's having like a really visceral, just devastated reaction. And Macy and Jenna are there and I think respond as well as they know how, especially Jenna, considering it was a situationship, I guess, gone horribly wrong. And it's hard watch, but also it was good to see the women, I think, like not pitting themselves against each other, which I think is something that Taylor, just by and large, it continues to do throughout. Everything is standing up for the other women and not like she's I think one of the only one who like maintains her girl's girl throughout.
Yeah, I just loved it that Jenna and Taylor were able to constructively talk through it and realize who the problem probably was.
Yeah, they kept the heat at Dakota's feet, which is really nice to see.
Yeah. But Chelsea, your additional thoughts on that?
No, I think that it was a good transactional, like she was just checking the receipts. Like Jenna was very quick to offer her phone, which I don't think a lot of people would be doing that. But yeah, just going through, and I think, you know, it was heartbreaking to watch Taylor just confess like how much she loves him and just feels betrayed. And I know Dakota later says that he was lying to protect her feelings, which is, I don't know, just that feels kind of like a very Mormon response of just not being able to have these hard conversations. And it's hard because it was like a whole season worth of just milking this drama. Mm-hmm. I'm really glad they pinned it in that first episode so we can just move on to other things. But yeah, it is really hard. And the barbecue scene, which I'm sure we'll talk about in another episode, that's where I think it really boils over. That's where the heart of the conversation truly lies. Yeah.
I do think it starts a little bit they go right after this pre-barbecue scene. The explosiveness within Taylor's family kind of starts when she's just talking with just her mom. She like tells her mom, I had a conversation with Jenna. This is what happened. And Taylor's mom her just initial reaction is extremely unsympathetic. And I think it is based on like, well, you know, you had sex. I think she said like Taylor's crying and is saying like, I don't know what to do. And I thought things were getting better. And she's just in like a real moment of sadness and her mom's like gut reaction is like, this is why we told you not to
Ugh.
have sex. And it's just really, it's a hard watch, and it just gets worse as the series progresses.
So stay tuned for our discussion of Taylor and her family. Natasha, any quick thoughts on this scene?
Yeah, I think this whole scenario is very Mormon, unfortunately. My understanding, you can tell me if I'm wrong, because I'm probably not as up to date on the details, but it seems to me like the betrayal happened between Taylor and Dakota really within the first week or two of them dating, which I find very Mormon. Why are you owing each other anything in the first 2 weeks of knowing each other?
Why is that?
Why do you owe some, unless you have specifically agreed that you're going to be exclusive after the first date or 2 or 3? Why is that just assumed? So I guess.
I mean, in Mormonism, you're a virgin until you get married.
Well, right.
So we don't
so you're
know.
asking me why is that?
We
in
don't know
Mormonism?
how to
Right.
deal with
Right. No,
anything more complex than don't have sex till you're married. Right.
I think that we overcommit or expect an overcommitment way too early, where really nobody is owed that. This is ownership model. This is you decided to have sex with me, I now own you in certain ways, or I own certain. You don't get to have privacy around other issues. But in my understanding, not to throw Dakota or Taylor under the box, because maybe they did, but I never heard that there was an agreement of exclusivity or an agreement of any sort. But it's all being filtered through, again, the slut shaming thing for Taylor, which is awful. And I think for Dakota, it's being filtered through this, oh no, I can tell now that somebody's upset with me. And what do Mormon men do when somebody's upset with their sexuality? They lie about it, right? I mean, these are very typical Mormon things. And what's the solution? According, like you say, to we'll just don't have sex with people. But that totally ignores Taylor's adulthood and her ability to want to have sex at whatever time frame she wants to have sex, right? And so there's just so many deep problems here that I think are just based on kind of cultural expectations of when you shouldn't have sex. If you're having sex, what does that automatically mean in an agreement space? Whereas kind of in mainstream culture, people are having sex with a variety of people while they're dating. And then eventually 3 to 6 months down the road, people might say, hey, are we kind of ready to become exclusive? And that's a conversation instead of just an assumption. So the lying and the agreements and the ongoing kind of expectations, I think, are messed up from day one, and why it's causing this problem.
Just a quick question.
Yeah.
Taylor was really upset because she'd basically said, like, you need to tell me whether or not this relationship happened, and he lied. Do you think that because it was early, like, what's your take on the honesty element?
I think
he needed to tell her
his
or not?
2 good things that he could have said was, it's none of your business, because it isn't, because she did not make any agreements with him. Or 2, yeah, I have been seeing some other people. Is that something we need to change? Those would have been 2 correct like ways that he could have come back to her. The lying was stupid, because now the betrayal isn't really about what happened the first 2 weeks. Now the betrayal is that he's been lying to her for like a year and a half, or however long he's been lying to her, right? And this is the same like with the pornography dilemma that we have in Mormonism, right? And this is the same with like so many things that we're like, but you owe me this. You owe me my comfort, is how we function in Mormon relationships. And you owe me every part of your honesty. We don't have any room for privacy. What makes a 2-week relationship where I owe you now all the information about what I'm doing with my other dating spaces? That's a very Mormon thing. So I understand why Taylor's upset. I understand why she had those reactions and why she had those expectations. I also understand why Dakota's like, oh no, I'm in trouble. Plus he has this whole history of being an addict, which right there, the relationship with lying and secrecy is very profound. And I'm sure he has much more work to do in that department of his life. So it kind of created this background where both of them were not really equipped to have an emotionally intelligent and sexually agreed upon realities of what they were doing together from the get-go.
Yeah.
Because we don't know how to do that.
I know. And then I think the crime though was the lying and the deleting the text messages and stuff. And that is like, if they could just get it to the root of what you were talking about, that would really absolve the last season worth of drama.
Yeah, I wish they could have really, instead of getting super defensive, like get more curious and really understand, okay, well, what was my role in this? What was your role in this? What do we both need to, what do we want going forward? How do we commit to that if we want it, right?
Yeah.
And how do we avoid these kinds of disasters? Because I do see a lot of love between them, and I see a lot of commitment, especially to their child. I see a lot of strengths in both of them. I just wish they would have had more. Like, this is where I would have told them, you know, you can blame each other all you want, but can we blame the system that raised both of you to leaving you completely ill-equipped to have these conversations and to have a healthy onboarding of a relationship, especially if you're going to have sex fairly early on, which is not trashy.
Well, unfortunately, we're right at the time we need to end. Let me just say really quickly, we've got, again, 800 people joining us live and thousands will watch this. If 5 or 10,000 of you could just take a second to like this episode, we know tens of thousands of you will end up watching it. If a few thousand of you will just like this episode, share it, comment on it, even after the live stream's over, it will help this episode go viral. And then a lot of other people will be able to benefit from the wisdom that Chelsea, Alyssa, and Natasha have shared with us today. So please do that. Really quickly, Chelsea, can you give a final shout out? You know, the one thing I'm thinking is I'm grateful to these Secret Lives of Mormon Wives women and to Hulu for bringing a spotlight to these really core issues. There's still a part of me that's sad, number one, at the absurdity of sort of the reality TV layer that has to be imposed on it, that is probably a turnoff for a lot of people. And as we'll discuss in future episodes, I question the ethics of what this is really doing to the mental health of the people involved, to the marriages and the relationships of the people involved, not to mention the children, the extended family of the people involved. Like, what I wish is that Hulu or Amazon or Netflix would like come to Chelsea and Alyssa and Natasha and say, let's do a Secret Lives of Lost and Found Wives. And Chelsea and Natasha will be the consulting advisors. And instead of the absurdity, you know, and the ridiculousness of some of this reality TV baggage, which I know is also the candy that makes people want to watch, but there's a part of me that feels like these topics are so important, so serious. I wish they could be explored in a mass media way without the ridiculousness and the potential abuse. You were looking at me, Alyssa. Are you saying you wouldn't want to watch it?
I would want to watch it. Great. Okay. Yeah, I like healthy people too. Yeah. I mean, I love watching dysfunction, but I love watching people make progress. That's great.
So are you consenting?
We would have to go to Utah Lake and do the coming out of the water with the white baptism looking dresses.
A white dress and dunk myself underneath.
So you are consenting to a Lost and
Absolutely not.
Secret Lives of Lost and Found Wives?
I feel like that it's just so hard to do that safely and
totally.
with consent, and it's also a personality thing. Like, just Anyway.
But it'd be cool, right?
There's a lot of amazing stories in Lost and Found, that is for sure.
Okay, so please plug the girls' camp camps.
Oh, that's nice.
As well as anything else you want to plug really quick.
Yeah, so we're hosting, this is our 3rd year doing it. We're doing a Reclaiming Girls Camp in September, the first weekend of September and October.
And the fun things that happen are? And
we have amazing workshop and fun like skits. It's all the fun parts of camp. It's very rowdy and fun, and it's overnight. It's at Camp Tracy, so the Cub Scout campground that none of us were able to go to growing up.
That's in Salt Lake for those who don't know.
Yeah, up Mill Creek Canyon. Yeah. And all the meals will be catered, everything. It's going to be such a good time. We had a couple hundred people up there last year. Mindy Gledhill came last year, but just like concerts. And anyway, it's just a lot of people miss like singing up in the mountains, doing crafts, having fun, being irreverent, and taking that back.
And you've announced some cool people that have committed to come, right?
Yes. Amy Alabas is going to be teaching us a workshop, both camps. It's like,
I'll put you on the spot.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of all the other people. We have, play camps. We have like self-defense camps. So it's going to be very Bottoms. If you've seen that movie, very queer coded. We have how to get involved with mutual aid discussions and how to serve in a way that's not propelling this white savior thing that we've all learned how to do in
Colonizing.
Mormonism. Yeah. Anyway, it's just going to be really fun. We're going to have a drag show. And anyway, there's just a lot. You can see it on our page. We've highlighted all the people who will be involved.
So the link is?
So it's lostandfound.club is our website, but yeah, Lost and Found Club on Instagram. And we have reels of previous camps, so you can kind of get a taste of what it looked like. We also have Dear Mormon Me. She'll be catering coffee for us, customized coffee cups and stuff. So it's going to be really fun.
Well, Chelsea, thanks for coming on Mormon Stories.
Thanks.
We always love having you. Hope when it works for your life and situation, we'd love to have you back.
Thanks, John.
Alyssa, how do people follow your cool stuff? And you may be either not available soon or
Yes.
you may be live streaming from a hospital.
Yeah, I told John, I was like, I love this show so much. If I'm in labor with my baby, I'm like, I will just put like a little screener up and like.
And Chelsea was like, I love that.
I'll be just like Whitney, yeah, and I'll be like, okay, but this episode was crazy.
Give me a moment. I'm having a contraction.
Like 1 minute, please. Go to someone else. Yeah, so that's fun. I'm on Instagram just at Alyssa Witbeck, but my website is alyssawitbeck.com. I just have links to publications on there, and that's mostly up to date.
She's an amazing writer. So yeah.
And Liz likes words.
Oh yes, I do
on
have
TikTok and
Yes.
Instagram.
Yes.
Okay.
I haven't
That's
used that
LYS.
Instagram,
Liz likes
but-
words. Yeah.
Yeah.
No Instagram, just TikTok.
Well, technically, yeah, I just haven't updated Instagram.
Okay. All right. Well, Alyssa, I love having you as well. So thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. It's fun.
And Natasha, plug the heck out of you and Symmetry Solutions if you want. Maybe you don't want to.
No,
Maybe
of
you don't
course
want
I want to. Of course, I have a fabulous team, and we're Symmetry Counseling now because I guess the algorithms thought we were a tech company.
Oh, really?
So we're Symmetry Counseling, but it's still Symmetry, and we have amazing people, all trained in religious trauma. Many of them training to become sex therapists. Some of them already are. So I'm very, very proud of my team. As far as these topics that we talk about today, so I have a Reclaiming Female Sexuality group coming up. I have a Healing from Male Sexual Shame group coming up, and not only a group, but a ketamine experience where several men will come and we'll do a group experience with ketamine on healing a lot of these sexual shame messages. I have an ethical non-monogamy group coming up in August, as well as a mixed orientation marriage group also coming up in August. Because as
That's
we
if
talked
you
today,
or your partner is queer.
yeah, like one of you is maybe either coming out or you've known all along that one of you is not necessarily, heterosexual. And yet you find yourself in a heterosexual relational structure. And what do you do about that? And whether or not, there's so many complex issues about that, like whether we stay together or not and how. And so I just come up with a lot of the groups of all the things we're all struggling with. So check us out. It's simcounseling.com or SYM or natashahelfer.com. And you can also follow me on social media. I'm Natasha Helfer MFT, pretty much on everything like TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. So
beautiful. All right. Well, thanks so much. Thanks to our staff that makes all this possible. Thanks to all of you, our live listeners. I want to do at least 3 to 5, if not 10 of these episodes, because it seems like a lot, but at the same time, these episodes are dense with really important, crucial topics. So I think there's more than 10 episodes worth of discussions. So count on those in the days, weeks, and months ahead. We'll have these women or others on to the extent of their availability. So watch out for that. Thanks Hulu and the women of Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, and the men, I guess, for their willingness to be fodder for these discussions. And then again, I just want to end by saying thanks to our donors that make Mormon Stories possible. We couldn't do it without you. If you value this type of content and you want to see it continue, the best way you can do that is by going to mormonstories.org, clicking on the donate button, becoming a monthly donor. You can also super chat, donate through YouTube. But then even if you can't support us financially, liking these episodes, subscribing to the channel, sharing it, commenting, all helps with the algorithm. So that's it for today. Be good to each other. Be kind to each other. Tune in again for another coverage of Secret Lives of Mormon Wives Season 2. And we'll see you all again soon on another episode of Mormon Stories Podcast. Take care.